Welcome to the Vol Bros. My name is Evan. This is my brother Rustin. I checked his name just to make sure that if it was not something different tonight, but it's Rustin tonight. We are two Vol Bros who are actually bros in real life. And man, oh man, what a whole lot of stuff going on. And so we're going live tonight on Twitter. Excuse me, X. I'm going to do that like all the time. The artist formerly known as Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. So we hope you chime in with us on one of those platforms. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments. That's always fun to see. So, Rustin, we got three topics we're going to discuss tonight. First topic is conference realignment, our general thoughts about it and how that would impact the Vols. Number two, should the expanded college football playoff format change? I think that's a very important topic. And last but certainly not least, any updates from fall camp. So, to start off with, Rustin, what are your general thoughts about conference realignment?
Well, I think we all knew it was coming. So, unfortunately, it's here. I don't think we're done. I'm hearing a lot of rumblings from people who are in the know, people who are behind the scenes saying that the ACC may be next. If the ACC folds, it's going to be real interesting to see what happens moving forward. Florida State's out there actively shopping themselves. Clemson is quietly shopping itself. Ironically, some of the schools that keep popping up are like North Carolina and Virginia. And I can understand why another conference might want North Carolina, but Virginia doesn't really bring anything to the table. So it would be interesting to see why Virginia would even be attractive to some conferences. I don't think it's over. I think there's going to be a lot more. I love Chip Kelly's kind of suggestion he put out there this week where he said, hey, let's just take all the Power 5 schools and make them one tier and take all the group of 5 schools and make them a second tier and have 2 separate national champions, let them play it out. And basically instead of having conferences, just have tier 1 and tier 2, which would be really interesting. And I mean, honestly, it's kind of where we're heading. So I'm not sure that would ever gain traction because there's too much money in the conferences. But I think we're heading toward 3 mega conferences and no one else.
I agree with you. I think that is unfortunately probably what's going to end up happening because let's be totally honest. The last 7 days, it has been a very public, gross, messy separation between Florida State and the ACC. Florida State outright said it's not a matter of if we leave, but when. Like their board of trustees said that. A few days later, we have rumors of the ACC trying to get 2 of those last 4 Pac-12 teams. So my general thoughts about it, a lot of people have said a lot of things about like regional rivalries and stuff like that. My thoughts about it are, I don't think it's as simple as that. From a fan's perspective, who is not, directly involved with any of the athletic departments, I can look at it and think part of this is idiotic. The Big 10 is now the Big 18. They're supposed to be institutions
and could be 20.
Yeah, they're supposed to be institutions of higher education, and they can't count how many schools are in their own conference. Same thing with the Big 12. No, they're now the Big 16, about to be the Big 18 probably. But you think about sports like basketball, softball, baseball, these midweek game sports. And for example, in the Big 10/18, Rutgers in New Jersey is going to be traveling literally across the country to play Oregon on a midweek game,
or potentially a tennis match,
or or volleyball or soccer or swimming. I mean, like that. there's no way the universities are making money off that. No way. Um, that there's just not enough dollars in TV deals and advertising. They're not making money off that. They're losing money off that. And to compound the problem, let's say that somebody in Oregon lives an hour away from the campus, and their kid plays on the soccer team. Okay, and so they got a Tuesday night game. They're like, awesome, that's just an hour away. We can make it down there to see Sally or Johnny play soccer. Let's say that they're going to Oregon State, a road game on a Tuesday night. No big deal. It's only a little bit farther than an hour. We can make it there for that game. That is much different than, oh, I have to fly to New Jersey to play Rutgers. I mean, that is a completely different thing. So it's not just the players.
Even if they stayed in the middle of the country, I mean, just saying, hey, you're playing at Iowa this week.
Right.
No family in Oregon's traveling to Iowa for a midweek game.
Right. And, so it's not just the players, it's their families and being able to see their kids play the sport that they love. But there's two sides to every coin. So whereas right now, a lot of teams are like, and a lot of people are like, oh, this is terrible, it's terrible. There are a lot of mid-major schools and a group of five schools that are licking their chops, thinking, oh man, devour each other. Because if the Pac 12 tries to save themselves, they're going to have to come for us. So, schools like Fresno State, San Diego State University, those schools,
Nevada.
they're loving this. Nevada,
Yep.
that's a great example. They're loving this right now because
Look
they're
at
seeing
SMU.
this.
SMU's out there positioning themselves with people saying, hey, we won't take a revenue share for 5 years if you'll just let us show up. It's like,
So,
who does that?
I mean, several of these West Coast schools are seeing this as their opportunity to join the Pac-12 that they've never had before. That they've never had this opportunity before. So there's a lot of schools. I mean, you got people literally on both sides of the spectrum here. Some people are hating it, and some are loving it because the ones that are loving it are seeing the dollar signs that it could potentially afford them. So, as with anything, it is not a cut and dry situation. There are many, many different facets to this. Um, but, you know, we're a Vols podcast. And so if the question becomes, well, how does this impact the Vols? Side note, we had two comments come in. Doug said, been looking forward to the broadcast. I appreciate that, Doug. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you having with us. Vols time. Hey, welcome, Vols time. Glad you're with us too. And they said the only way Florida State gets an SEC, Notre Dame or Clemson would have to come with them. So personally, now I agree with that. There needs to be an even number of teams. I guess it doesn't have to be, but everybody else has even numbers. I think Clemson would be the team that enters with Florida State. If Florida State is brought into the SEC, I think Clemson is a natural fit. What's really going to be fascinating before we talk about the Vols and how it impacts them, what's really going to be fascinating is basketball. Because if you remember, just a few years ago when the Big East, well, several years ago, the Big East dissolved. Then a few years later, the Big East comes back, and it's literally just a basketball conference. That's all it was. And so what are they going to do? Because some of their schools are being brought in by these other schools or other conferences. That's going to be pretty interesting to watch how that unfolds and how it impacts basketball, specifically the Big East Conference and basketball. So how does this impact the Vols? Well, here's my opinion on that. We can't know yet. And what I mean by that is we have a little bit of knowledge about the 2024 schedule and what the no divisions meant for the Vols. But that's not the whole story because after 2024, there's going to be a totally different schedule. Like could be a totally different schedule. They haven't said what it's going to be yet. So it could be, all of a sudden in 2024, it goes to a 9-game conference schedule. Or they could say, okay, it's an 8-game schedule, but these certain amount of teams are their year in, year out opponents. There's just unfortunately, we're too early in the game to say how it's going to impact the Vols, other than the fact that it could potentially allow more SEC teams to get into the expanded college football playoff, because there's just going to be numerically more teams in the SEC. What do you think about like how it could potentially impact the Vols? You got any thoughts on that?
I mean, just more money. So I think that the most interesting thing to me, and this is where it would affect Tennessee. This every morning this week, Greg McElroy and Cole Kubelik have had different people on their show talking about realignment, and probably the most interesting one all week was a financial expert, and I can't remember his name, but he got on and he broke down what Greg Sankey said early in the week, and basically said, "Okay, let's read between the lines and really hear what he was saying." And what he showed was there's a formula. So if a school wants to join the SEC, Greg Sankey's basically laid down the gauntlet of you've got to fit this formula for how much revenue you're going to bring with you. And so what he essentially was saying was Florida State and Clemson aren't options because they can't bring enough money with them. The magic number is around $70 million a year. And so he said, right now in America, there is only one team who's not tied to a conference, technically, who could join the SEC and meet Greg Sankey's criteria, and that's Notre Dame. He said, now, if Florida State can go out and find a benefactor.
As you were saying that, Ricky was betting it was Notre Dame. He was right.
Yeah. They're literally the only option. They're the only team, our only school in America that can fit that 70 million a year threshold. So he said the only other option could be if Florida State can go get some private benefactors who are willing to ante up on an annual basis to supplement their revenue, that Florida State could come with them. But he insinuated that Clemson doesn't have any interest in doing that. So if there's any expansion at all, it would be Notre Dame and Florida State. But if you read between the lines with what Greg Sankey was saying, they're not interested. I mean, that's really what he was saying. Like, they're very comfortable at 16. They're very comfortable where they are. They like the revenue sharing they have that's going on right now. With all the TV issues that the Pac-12 and all these other conferences are having, all that means is more TV games for the SEC, which means more money to the SEC, which means more money to Tennessee. So he's in the catbird seat. He's sitting there going, we've got what we need. Y'all are all imploding. It's just going to mean more money for us. So we'll just sit here and enjoy the checks.
Ricky said any potential for bringing in Big Ten.
So even there,
just my screen went blank there for a second. It's live, so that's how it works sometimes. Hopefully, I'm back now.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm back now. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So even in the Big Ten, there's really only two.
So Ricky said Big Ten schools potentially.
Right. In the Big Ten, there's really only two that could bring 70 million plus annually, and that's Ohio State and Michigan. They aren't leaving the Big Ten. So it's really Notre Dame and Florida State or no one.
Yeah, and then you get into the whole geographic element of it. It is the Southeastern Conference. Ricky said Penn State might be able to bring in that much money.
They broke it. They broke it down.
Into the geographic element of it.
Yeah, on the show they broke down and talked through who the options were, and in the Big Ten there was only two.
You got to figure, at what point does the Southeastern Conference become? I mean, we're already stretching it with people in Texas and stuff like that. But at what point are we no longer in the Southeastern Conference? And I mean, you might see. I mean, I don't know. I don't think they bring in enough money based on what was said, but Oklahoma State would be potentially in that geographic area where they might be able to stretch it to. I don't think they'll bring in enough, but teams like that could potentially come in. I personally, well, that'll be the next. That'll be the next thing. Ducati 1090. Hey, glad you're with us, Ducati. They said a North and a South division in the SEC potentially.
Or
Before we talk
all the
about,
teams,
go ahead.
or all the teams in the South, including the Big 12, all merged together, and all the teams in the North all merged together, and there's
Yeah,
again just two mega conferences.
yeah, that could happen. Um, before we go any further, Doug had a question. He said, "What do you prefer, an 8 or 9 game conference schedule?" I think I like the 9 game. And Vols time agreed and said 9 games with Oklahoma and Texas coming into the SEC. Ricky said mega conference and do it like soccer. So I don't know how soccer works in NCAA. So Ricky, tell us in the comments. Explain what you mean.
I think he's probably referring to pro soccer, where you can be relegated if you don't continue to win at a certain
Oh
level in the
yeah.
top tier. You get bumped down to the to the bottom tier.
Yeah, the Premier League stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he said that absolutely. So 8 or 9 game conference schedule. Rustin, what would we actually did an episode about this. Rustin, what would your pick be in that situation?
My pick would be 9. What I think is going to happen is it's going to stay 8, because, well, again, I'll I'll reference back to what we talked about on that episode. If it doesn't stay 8, then you can kiss Group of 5 and FCS football goodbye. They need all those extra games. They need those money games to survive. And I don't think there's enough presidents and ADs in the SEC that want 9 for it to ever even matter. When they voted this past year, it was pretty resounding that they wanted 8. There weren't many people in the room that wanted 9. So I think they view it as, if we're good, we're going to play way more than 12. So why would we not want 4 cupcakes on the schedule?
Well, the reason, so my personal preference would be 8 games. That is solely because all that matters is wins. That's it. You could have a massive cupcake schedule, and if you win every game, you're in the playoff. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like that's the bottom line. At the end of the year, who had the most wins, they get in the playoff. So that's why I would say 8 games, just because you have a better chance of getting in the playoff. And I mean, my goodness, SEC. Okay. You think about when the back in June 14th, when the 2024 schedule SEC conference opponents were released, all of a sudden it was like, holy cow, those are hard schedules. And that was just 8 games. And so you throw in another one in there, man, that's tough. So I would say 8 games, just because you have a better chance of making it to the playoff. And ultimately, that's all that matters. So speaking of conference realignment and speaking of the playoff, should the expanded college football playoff format change? Now, just as a refresher, I want everybody to read the current criteria, I guess you could say, the current format. So this upcoming, not this season, but next year, 2024, the playoff field will comprise the selection committee's 6 highest ranked conference champions and its next 6 highest ranked teams. The 4 highest ranked conference champions will earn top seeds in a first round bye. The other 8 teams will play in the first round. So as an example, if that had happened this year, here's what it would have looked like. These would have been the top 4 seeds with byes because they all were conference champions, and they were the highest ranked 4 teams. And so since they were conference champions, they got first round byes. The next 8 teams So Clemson and Tulane would have been in it because they were conference champions. But notice, just because they were conference champions, it did not bump them up to numbers 5 and 6. They got in the playoff because they were conference champions. Their ranking was based on their college football playoff ranking. And so Tulane got a bump up because they, were a conference champion, so they're automatic qualifier. 6 highest ranked conference champions. Here's why I think that the answer to this question, should the expanded college football playoff format change? I don't think it's an option. I think it has to, because there may not be 6 conferences. That's the thing. If the Pac-12 goes away, which right now there's only 4 conferences or 4 teams in it, there goes that one. So now the Power 5 is down to Power 4, because that was the whole idea, was you get the 5 Power 5 conference champions and one group of 6 champion or group of 5 champions. So yay, you satisfy everybody's desires there. But that's not going to be the case anymore. So now all eyes really turn to the ACC. If the ACC remains a conference and they absorb the Pac-12's done. It's done. I don't see how they're going to survive. So if the ACC absorbs 2 of those teams, now you have a Power 4. Do you do the 2 highest ranked group of rest of the 5 champions? If so, you could end up with a team that's really ranked 22nd or lower in the poll getting to go to the playoff over teams that are ranked 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, like that. So I don't see how they can do that. I think it's going to have to change. And, Greg Sankey, he was already talking about this on Feinbaum earlier in the week. The writing's on the wall. Yes, it will have to be revisited, because the Power 5, as we know it, may no longer be 5. And they're not going to let a team that, won the AAC and they're ranked 20th get in over the 12th through the 19th ranked teams. Surely they won't do that.
Well, just look at this year. I mean, the ACC right now is a slightly above average Clemson and a very unproven Florida State. Florida State could end up being pretty good, but nobody knows if they're going to be yet. They haven't proven anything. So let's say Florida State ends up being pretty good. The rest of the conference is terrible. So Florida State can coast through that conference, beat Clemson, their one decent game, beat Clemson in the conference championship, and they automatically get one of those 4 byes. There are 4 teams in the SEC right now better than Florida State. So how much sense does it make for Florida State to not only make it in the playoff, but get a first-round bye when there's other conferences with multiple teams better than them? So, the whole thing better get scrapped, and they better go to a sheer ranking and strength of schedule process, and pick the true 12 best teams, because this whole first round bye based on what conference you win, that's going to be gone. I mean, like I said, the rumblings I'm hearing is if the ACC does collapse, and it's getting close, if a couple teams go to the SEC, a couple teams go to the Big Ten, and the remainder get absorbed by the Big 12, now we don't even have 4 conferences, we have 3. Right. So, and there are people who are very much in the know and behind the scenes on those college campuses saying that's a very real possibility. So, it's the whole thing they've set up. I do think it's interesting when you read the verbiage around how they set up that 12-team playoff. The NCAA put that in print. So what they really just told everybody is they didn't really believe all this realignment would happen. They were banking on all these conferences staying put and being where they were. So clearly the NCAA was in the dark on quite a bit of this, because they never would have put that in print if they had known that any of this was possible.
You're 100% correct. Absolutely. Because this is embarrassing to them now.
Mm-hmm.
It shows that they had literally no idea what was going on within conferences and between conferences. And and conversations that were being had that they were not privy to.
Right.
So,
And
I,
zero control over their own member schools. I
yep,
mean, that
that's exactly right.
Greg McElroy told something this week that I had not heard, but he was citing very specific sources. Do you know do you know how Southern Cal and UCLA ended up in the Big Ten?
Hmm.
Fox. Fox
That
orchestrated
makes
that
sense.
deal. Fox orchestrated that deal. There were Big Ten presidents who didn't even know conversations were taking place until it was announced that they were joining. Didn't even
That
know
makes
it was a
sense.
conversation. And Fox has a significant ownership in the TV ratings of the Big Ten, and Fox's headquarters is in Los Angeles. So Fox orchestrated that entire deal with the Big Ten chairman. Most of the schools had no concept that it was even taking place. And then all of a sudden they showed up for a vote to welcome UCLA and USC, and everybody's going, wait, what? What are we doing? But when he showed them the numbers, they were like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll do that. That's good.
Yeah. Vols time is right. He said network money is what's driving it all. Yeah, that's exactly right. 100%. And that's why, there's no way around it. They're going to have to change and reevaluate what they have published as the potential college football playoff expanded. It's going to have to change. Now, Doug asked a really good question that no one's ever asked this question on the show before, and I'm glad he did. So, do you like the 12-team playoffs, or do you think they should be a 16-team playoff, or do you think it should have stayed at 4? Do you want to answer first, Rustin? You want me to?
I can. I hated
Okay.
4. I don't think 4 is good at all. The FCS has done 16 for years, and when they would say we can't pull it off, it was like you literally have another division of the NCAA who's been doing it for 20 years. Don't say you can't pull it off. So it always drove me nuts when they only did 4. I do actually like 12 more than 16 because there's a lot of wear and tear on these guys, and most of them are going to have a future in the NFL. So I think there's benefit to rewarding teams who have played really, really well with that first round bye, and giving. I mean, let's be honest, the 4 teams that get the first round bye most likely have the most guys who are going to have NFL careers. So eliminating one game of wear and tear and potential injury for them, I think, is a really smart thing.
I totally 100% agree. I didn't like 4. I mean, obviously, well, I mean, I'm a Tennessee fan, and if it had been more than 4, we would have been in the playoff this year. So, like I like it being more than 4. I think 12 is a good number because, just like Rustin said, if you expand it to 16, then no one's getting a bye. What I think will be most fascinating, and I don't even remember what episode it was we talked about this. We can't get into it right now. Maybe we can do this another time. But what's going to be fascinating is if 3 years, if there are still conference championship games. Because, I mean, here's the deal. There are no more divisions in the SEC. Let's just use the SEC, for example. There are no more divisions. So you can still have a conference champion. It would just be whoever wins the regular season. Now, the question then becomes, and you'll obviously have to have multiple tiebreakers, but they're going to have that anyway to determine who gets to go to the championship game because there's no divisions. So you're going to have the top 2 teams. Well, what if there's no common opponents and then we get all this tiebreaker stuff? But right now, the way it's set up, with the 12 team, or if it was 16 teams and nobody got a bye, here's what would happen. You would have conference championship weekend, and then literally the very next weekend is the first round of the playoff. So next season in 2024 in December, the first weekend in December will be the conference championship weekend like it always is. And instead of getting a week off to recuperate and that kind of stuff after playing a whole season, no, they're going straight into the playoff. So there's in 2 to 3 years, all of these college athletics directors and they're going to be like, this is too much.
I can I can probably tell you the exact date it's going to end.
Well, I mean, like you're going to see. I hope not, but you might see a rise in injury numbers during the playoff because people's bodies are just physically exhausted and spent, and so they're gonna say we might need to do away with these conference championship games just so that we have a week off before the playoff. And that's not going to be a popular thing with a lot of people. But I guarantee you, behind the scenes, there's going to be a whole lot of people that are quietly very happy about it because it's giving their players a chance to recuperate. Um, so I like 12. I think the most interesting potential ramification of the 12 team playoff is what ends up happening to conference championship games in a few years. Obviously, once again, and Dester makes a good point. He said, just like Vols said, network money is driving the NCAA out of business. So network money is obviously going to be the biggest hurdle to get over with the SEC championship game because it's such a moneymaker. But at what point is too much too much? And so it'll be interesting. I would say within 5 years we may not have a conference championship game anymore.
I'll give it 3. 2026, the SEC contract with Mercedes-Benz runs through 2026.
Well, there you go.
They won't renegotiate that contract. It'll end in 2026.
And Mr. Jones said no way they would get rid of conference title games. And you know what? You're probably right. Because there is so much money involved. But when teams start seeing the potential rise in injury or all these kind of things, there's going to be a lot of voices behind the scenes that are going to be like, these guys are playing too many games. Because, I mean, think about it. Right now, you got to.
They'll set up the royalty checks just like they do the NCAA tournament. The deeper you go in the postseason, the bigger the cut you get. They'll kill the conference championship game because those playoff paychecks are going to be significantly larger than the conference championship checks.
Well, I mean, think about it this way. Right now, in order to win a national championship and go undefeated, you'd have to be 15-0. So if we add in, well, that's fair. The SEC championship is often more difficult than national championship. Yeah, that's fair. If you go to the expanded playoff and you run the table and you win the SEC championship game, so you're 13-0 right there. Then you have to win at least 4 more games to win the playoff. Unless you're, a conference champion, you'd probably be one of the top 4, so you might get a first round bye.
Right.
So you're at least adding 1, potentially 2 more games. 17-0 or 16-1 if you lost a game and made it to the playoff, and then won all 4 games in the playoff. That's a lot of games, and I don't know. I mean, money. You're right. Money's driving it, no doubt about it. But at what point? Eventually somebody's going to be talking about player safety. I mean, that's just the bottom line.
And we talk about money driving it. The other thing that'll start driving it is money in a different way. Every coach has bonus incentives in their contracts. If I get a $250,000 bonus for going to the SEC championship, but I get a $500,000 bonus for winning a playoff game, dadgummit, I want that extra week of rest. I want that extra week of prep time. I couldn't care less about the SEC championship. I want to go win that first round playoff game because that's a significantly larger bonus because there's going to be more money attached to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's one thing that we mentioned in a previous show that nobody's really talked about yet, and I don't know why. Hopefully there's already documentation developed about this thing. If you know the answer to this, please tell us in the comments. Mr. Jones has some of his patented one-liners going. I like it. But if you know the answer to this, please let us know. But here's one thing that is a major factor for the college football playoff that coaches in particular are going to want to know the answer to. Right now, let's say you end your season and you're in the Tax Slayer Bowl or the Music City Bowl or something like that. you get 15 extra practices to prepare for that bowl game. Okay. Well, what if you're in the playoff and you have a first round game that first week after the SEC championship game? So let's say that you're in the SEC championship game, you lose. So you're not one of the 4 conference champions that get a bye. So you're having to play the next week. And you only get 5, 6 practices before that game. Well, what happens if you lose that game? Do you get to have the other 10 practices that other teams that are going to like the Tax Slayer Bowl? Do you get to have the same amount of practices that they do? Or is your season over and you have to call it quits right then and you miss out on those other 10 games? I guarantee you that's going to be a hot topic of discussion. I guarantee you. And so they're going to have documentation written out about that. They have to have a game plan for that because that will happen.
And you may have inadvertently just said it, but the other thing they haven't nailed down is if I lose in the first round of the playoffs in the 3rd week of December and a January 5th bowl game that's not a part of the playoffs wants me, can I turn around and go play in that bowl game to get my younger guys some reps? That's the part they haven't nailed down.
Great question. It's going to be a whole new world. There's a lot of stuff to be ironed out. That's for sure. Vols Time said, will the bowl games go away with an expanded playoff? I don't think so. There's too much money involved.
They've already said it
Music
won't.
City Bowl.
They've pre-identified which bowls are going to be a part of the playoff process, and all the rest will still exist. Honestly, what might happen is they might actually expand the bowls and take more teams because they don't know what's going to happen, if teams lose early in the playoffs. And now what you will see is, let's say Mississippi State and Missouri didn't play each other during the regular season and they both got to 6 wins. You would have the opportunity with all this realignment for a bowl to say, Music City Bowl, for example, to say, well, we can't take, or let's use the example of some bowl that has a deal with the Pac-12. And they would say, well, we can't take a Pac-12 team because they don't exist anymore. So we're going to take Mississippi State and Missouri. And so you might actually see SEC teams that didn't get to play each other during the regular season match up against each other in the bowl season.
That's a very interesting idea right there. I like that. That could definitely happen. Because like you said, bowls right now have contracts with conferences. Like, the 3rd highest ranked team after the playoff, gets theirs, goes to the Tax Slayer Bowl, that kind of SEC team and that kind of thing.
Think about all the bowls that have current contracts with the Pac-12. They are praying that thing folds because their options right now are Stanford, Cal, Oregon State, and Washington State. So they're like, please go under. we don't want these options.
Yeah, that way they can get more SEC teams or Big Ten teams, where they're going to make more money. And let's be honest, they'll make more money that way.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Jones said maybe do away with the cupcake games early in the year if we need to drop games to add games. Yeah, I get that. I mean, that's obviously an option. But once again, right there, you've got, like Rustin was saying earlier, those group of 5 schools and those FCS schools, they 100% rely on those big payday games with large Power 5 schools to essentially make their athletic budget for the year.
Yeah.
So at that point, when you're talking about like Samford University, UTC in Chattanooga, UT Martin, these schools, it's not just football that would be hurting at that point. It's literally their entire athletic department.
Yeah.
They would not be able to maintain the same budget that they have now because a substantial portion of that budget comes from these games that they're making money off of.
Yeah.
So
A lot
You
of
know
people
that
don't realize that. A lot of people don't realize that the small schools, especially their minor sports, their entire budget exists because they got blown up by some Power 5 school.
sure, yeah.
It definitely pays for a lot more than football.
You would there would be so many far-reaching consequences by doing that, and we just more than we could probably even imagine. Mr. Jones said, "What if Amari? Oh, here we go, theory time. What if Amari Jefferson is planning on flipping to Tennessee and just wanted to pour salt in the wound of Bama by taking a recruit off that they thought they had? I love it. That's total. I love that. That's a conspiracy theory. I'm all on board with. I like that. I love it. Um, I'm all for that." Doug said, "I would think you would have too many players opting out if they lost in the playoffs."
Let me give him a stereo a scenario. So remember what we just said. If Tennessee lost in the first round of the playoffs and 3 weeks later the Outback Bowl was happening, would all of Tennessee's best players opt out? Yeah, probably so.
Probably.
But it's an opportunity to get extra practice in, and it's an opportunity to get your next generation of kids legitimate snaps in a college football game. And let's be honest, if Josh Heupel said, we're going to go to the Outback Bowl, there would be 80,000 Tennessee fans who go to the Outback Bowl to watch the second stringers play because that's what Tennessee fans do. And the Outback Bowl knows that. And so, I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a bunch of bowls kind of hold off on sending out bids to see what happens with the playoffs unless the NCAA goes ahead and says you can't play two. But
well, and think about this as far as early enrollees go. So this year, Nico Iamaleava was at all the practices leading into the Orange Bowl, and he was around the program during that time. Well, if the rules change and you're done after, like, let's say you have a first round loss in the playoff, those kids that were early enrollees that were there, that were partaking in practice, they wouldn't be out of high school yet. Their high school would still be in session, and when that first round of playoff games happens, so they would miss all of those practices. Whereas if they allow teams to go on, which I mean, I'm going to bet that I don't know, money talks, but if they allow teams to go on, then all those kids that are early enrollees, then they get to come practice. So that's another element to this. There's so many facets to this.
that's the case that I think a lot of the schools will make to the NCAA
Absolutely.
for
Yes.
why they should be able to do both.
Absolutely. Yep. Mr. Jones said, "Is Amari Jefferson still committed to Tennessee for baseball and Bama for football? How's that going to work out?" Yeah, that's a good
portal.
question. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, absolutely. So fun stuff to talk about. Man, oh man, so many different implications to think about, and all these things that this expanded football playoff can bring. Like there's just so many different, far-reaching consequences of whatever decision is made, not just on the teams in the playoff, but how that ultimately impacts small schools and their budgets. And it's incredible to think about the consequences and ramifications. Well, our last topic is the Vols fall camp updates. You may have noticed on the thumbnail of this, it's a Cooper Mays injury question mark. Something happened. I don't think we'll ever know, honestly, what happened. All that Josh Heupel said today was that he had a minor procedure. I think yesterday was when the procedure happened.
Yep.
Is that right? So right now we're 23 days away from kickoff. He said he'll be out a couple weeks and ready to go for the opener. We have been very vocal proponents on this show of just how important Cooper Mays is to the offensive line. That's a big deal. You hope that he is totally fine, and that he is fully ready to go by the opener. But I would just like to remind everyone of what happened last season. Last season, we were told that Cedric Tillman had a minor procedure on his left ankle, and we saw how much he got to play after that. I sincerely hope that this truly is a minor procedure and that he is 100% fully healthy by the first game. Because what you don't want to happen is, listen, every single year, by the end of the year, we hear about guys that were playing through injuries for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they just nobody knew about it. And then you hear, well, he's finally fully healthy, and we're like, wait, I didn't know he wasn't fully healthy.
Yeah.
And so what you hope is that that's not a situation with Cooper that they're like, oh yeah, he's good to go, he's ready, but really he's got this kind of lingering injury that he's playing through. For his sake, I hope that doesn't happen because this was his money year. This was the year that he was going to be earning a living for himself in the National Football League after this year. And so, for his own sake, I hope he's okay. He's fully healthy. And for the sake of Tennessee's playoff chances, I hope that he is fully healthy because if they're going to reach the playoff, he's got to be snapping the ball every play. What else do you think about that, or what else are you hearing about fall camp?
Well, I think the good news is our first two games are Virginia and Austin P. So
Yeah,
even if it does linger a little bit, I mean, I don't think Josh Heupel would have gone so far as to say he'll be ready for game one unless he had a definitive prognosis from the doctor that he will be ready for game one. But the beauty of it being Virginia and Austin P is he doesn't have to play a whole lot of snaps. They
yeah,
can bring that along slowly. If it bothers him at all, there's special shots for that. And they can make
yeah.
sure by Florida he's ready to go and feeling great. Um, for those of you who don't know how football scrimmages go, scrimmage one should always be won by the defense. Always. Um, if a coach comes in after scrimmage one and says the defense really won the day today, the defense looked great, the defense this, the defense that, that's a good sign. That's the way it should be. If a coach comes, which is what happened today, if a coach comes in and says defense kind of was 50-50, offense won some, defense wins some, that's cause for a little bit of concern. If a coach comes in on scrimmage one and says offense won the day today, you're in trouble because the defense should never, ever lose scrimmage one. Scrimmage one is absolutely orchestrated to be 100% in the favor of the defense. You limit your offensive reps because you don't want to get your skill guys injured early in camp. You limit your playbook, same reason. You don't want guys running routes that could potentially get them injured or have a collision downfield early in camp. And the defensive line in scrimmage one should always dominate because the offensive line can't do everything they need to do. In a normal game, if I'm playing right tackle and I'm facing Will Anderson, for example, at least once a series, I'm going to chop his legs out from under him. Just keep him guessing. I'm going to make sure he knows his knees can get hit. I can go low. I can chop block him anytime I feel like it. You don't do that to your own teammates. It's too much opportunity for injury. So the defensive line knows the offensive line can't chop them. And so it makes it really easy for them to just pin their ears back and go because the offensive line can't do the things they need to do. So when Josh Heupel walks in today and says, we held out a bunch of guys on offense, check. Yep, you should do that. Defensive line looked great, handled everything they needed to handle. We're very dominant. Yep, check. That's the way it should be. And the defense won the day. Awesome. Those are all the things we want to hear after scrimmage one. Now, scrimmage two, you typically open things up a little more for the offense. And, typically the offense wins scrimmage two. So the vice versa will be in effect. If Josh Heupel comes back after scrimmage two and says, yeah, the defense won the day, okay, that's a problem. But the defense should win scrimmage one. That should just be a given.
A couple comments came through there. Mr. Jones said, "Is Nico ready just in case we need him sooner than later?" Now, that's a very good question. And we've really had two kind of differing answers about that from the coaching staff in their press conferences,
Mm-hmm.
really within the past week and a half. About a week and a half ago, maybe a week, uh, Coach Halsley was on the podium, and he was asked, "Is Nico ready?" Essentially, if he was forced into action or something like that, would Halsley be comfortable with putting Nico out there? And he said, absolutely. He said he would be very comfortable putting him out there. Um, really, really high praise for Nico. You got to wonder, is that just him building confidence in his the psyche of his quarterback? I don't know, but that's what he said. We got kind of a different, not terrible, like bad answer, but not as good as that from Heupel today. Heupel said that Nico came in much further along, they hope for, and that kind of stuff. Like, he's doing great. But he's like, he's got to get better. He said you can see him progressing and running the offense now, knowing what they want to do. But he said he has to grow up really fast. Like, so clearly there's still some, I mean, he's a true freshman. There has to be. They haven't even played the first game yet.
Yep.
But
he also said, and this was a huge positive, he also said that Nico doesn't make the same mistake twice.
Yeah, that was good. You're right. That's right.
Freshman quarterbacks, especially in a system like this, are going to make a lot of mistakes. So for the head coach to say, and the offensive expert to say he doesn't make the same mistake twice, that's a big positive.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Vols Time said, who knows if they expand the playoffs enough, Vanderbilt might even get
I don't think they're expanding to 132.
Yeah, I was about to say that'd be the whole league. Vols Time said they were saying Cooper will be good in 2 weeks. Yeah. I just hope that is honest from the training staff or no, I shouldn't say that. Honest from the sports information department. Because like I said, last year, Cedric Tillman was only going to miss a week or two after he got, healthy from the surgery. And we saw what happened. So I'm hoping it's nothing like that. Nothing. I'm hoping it's very simple. Doug said, sounded like the defense is going to be better. Defensive line is doing really well. You know that, by the way. Coach Gardner was talking about him 100%. Coach Gardner likes what he's got right now in that defensive line. You can tell. And that is very encouraging for all Vols fans everywhere. That is a big, big deal.
He keeps bringing up Omar Norman Lott. That dude has clearly shown up and been a difference maker. Rodney Gardner doesn't name drop. If he likes somebody, he makes it known. If he doesn't talk. So for him to keep saying that name over and over means that dude is really playing well.
And I also got, I got encouraged by what we heard about Elijah Simmons. For those of you who may not know, Elijah Simmons is now number 10. He used to be number 51. Now he's number 10. He's actually in the photo on the thumbnail on this video. He has always been a just huge guy. I mean, just a mountain of a guy. And he's actually trimmed down a whole lot. He's still one of the biggest guys on the whole team, but Gardner told him, he's like, listen, if you're a defensive lineman, you're wearing number 10, you better be a dude if you're wearing number 10 as a defensive lineman. And so, I hope that they're seeing him, shine right now on the defensive line. That's right. Play like number 10. That's right. If you're going to wear it, you better play like it. I'm going to tell you one thing that was very encouraging. Okay, side note, McAllen Castles was a super fun interview to listen to. That guy, he was just tickled to death to be there. I mean, like it was the happiest press conference I think I've ever seen.
Not a whole lot of media at UC Davis. He's not used to having a bunch of people in front of him.
Yeah. He just couldn't stop smiling. He was so excited to be at the podium and answering all these questions. And he was just thrilled. It was the coolest interview, man. Just so cool. And one thing that was extremely encouraging is they asked my favorite. I love it when they ask these questions, but they said, McAllen, who is a player on the opposite side of the ball that has really stood out to you. And the first person that he mentioned was Arion Carter. He said that guy can fill a hole faster than anybody I've ever seen. And I'm like, sign me up for that. I mean, that's awesome. That is, he said, hit. And then after that, he said, I've never seen a player come in so ready to play from day one as him. That is tremendous news.
Yeah.
So I like that. That's great.
Especially when he's lining up across from Keenan Peely and Aaron Beasley every day. So he's watching Arion Carter come in and be no drop off. You know, he didn't mention Keenan and Aaron. He mentioned Arion.
Yeah, that was the first person out of his mouth.
That's high praise.
Yep. You know, then after a little while, he got to go on. You know, he mentioned, whoops, I just bumped that. You know, may have heard that. He mentioned Tank McCullough. He said, you know, he's really solid defensively. You know, after a little bit, he mentioned some other guys. He said, you know, Beasley and Peely. He said that, you know, they're solid. They don't do anything wrong back there. But just like Rustin just said, first person out of his mouth was Arion Carter. So you got two redshirt freshman seniors and a true freshman. And the first person that he mentions is the true freshman and says that guy fills holes like he's never seen before, faster than anybody he's ever seen. Man, that's awesome. That is awesome. Vols Time said, I could see Aaron Beasley being a first round pick in the NFL. If he has 13 games this year, like he had in the Orange Bowl last year, 100% yes. He will certainly be a top 2 or 3 round draft pick if he keeps playing like he did at the end of the season last year. It was incredible to see the leap that he took during the season last year. I mean, it was incredible to see his progression. Doug said, the staff has really hit a home run in the transfer portal this year. I'm really happy with who they picked up. No doubt about it. Yeah. Absolutely. You got Omar Norman Lott. You got Andre Carrick. You got McAllen Castles, John Campbell. Absolutely. I mean,
Gabe Judy Lawley, Dante
absolutely.
Thornton.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy that they went
all
in the portal.
Positions of need.
Yeah.
Keenan Peely.
It's crazy that they went in the portal, found guys in every position in need, and every one of them has panned out. Like you would think somebody would have faltered. Pretty incredible.
Absolutely. Mr. Jones said after this year, Joe Milton will be Joe Millions, and that is exactly right. He will be, you heard it here first multiple times from both of us. He will be next year's Anthony Richardson in the draft combine. Everybody be like, wow, this guy, he's got all the measurables.
Who has been announced as the starter in Indianapolis, which is just crazy. I mean, the guy has already won the job.
So you're going to see that next year, you know, in all week long, and then combine is going to be Joe Milton threw the ball 95 yards yesterday. Joe Milton jumped higher than any quarterback ever has in the vertical leap yesterday. That's what you're going to hear next year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. This has been really good. We appreciate everybody joining us. Hey, we got some super exciting guests lined up. Sounds like it's a done deal. It sounds like it's going to happen. We'll have Austin Price joining us on here. So we're super excited about that. We got Josh Mancuso coming back on. He's going to give us his game by game prediction for the whole season, which is going to be really exciting. We got a lot of stuff coming up over the next few weeks. All of that's going to happen before the kickoff of the season. So we got a lot of really exciting things coming up. So if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe. So you're always with us and you see these things. We're excited that when the season starts, Reed Carringer is going to join us once a month for a live show. And you'll get to, you know, if you can't see, it's kind of got a glare on it, but right back here behind me is the Football Time in Tennessee magazine. Reed is one of the producers for that. His whole family is what makes that. Ed, we appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. We're super excited about what's on the horizon for the Vol Bros podcast. It's going to be so much fun. Rustin, any last thoughts before we sign off for the evening?
No. The one thing I am watching for scrimmage too, Andre Turrentine is taking all the first team reps at free safety. Tank McCullough has
That
been,
is very interesting.
yeah, Tank McCullough has been running with the twos. So, and that's been the case since the first day of practice, and that's how they started today. So I'm curious to see if that continues. That was kind of a shocker.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You wonder if it's just a message to Jalen McCullough or not. Doug said, enjoy your channel so much. Looking forward to the next one. Hey, we really appreciate that, Doug. Thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us and all your insightful questions and comments. Thank you so much. Mr. Jones said, any recruiting news? Not a whole lot. It's been kind of a quiet week. If I had to guess, I would say that really nationwide, there won't be a whole lot of news for the next few weeks because high school games are starting up all across the country. So kids are focusing on that.
Coaches
a lot
are
of people
focusing on their team right now.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good point. When you think about if guys aren't committed right now, that means they're waiting to see what happens within the season. If you want to see some fun recruiting stuff, just keep your eyes on Florida for the next month and a half. That's going to be what's fascinating, because if Florida starts off their season 2-5, something like they're 2-3, and then up 2-14, 3-5, something like that. If they start off their season by the end of September, mid-October, Florida's recruiting class may be just in shambles. That's going to be fascinating to watch. And so I don't think you're really going to see a whole lot of recruiting news between now and really the end of September, beginning of October at the earliest. Because once you hit October, then kids are going to start like, okay, well, signing days in 2 months. I'm going to go ahead and make my commitment, that kind of thing. So that's a really good question. There's not been a whole lot right now. That's why, in the end of July, there was kind of a flurry of commitments. And that's because the kids were making their commitment before their season started. So the kids made their commitment. Now they're like, okay, now I can focus on my season. Yep. Because right now you got scrimmages, jamborees, high school, all across the country going on. So that's why there's not any big news right now. Yep. Billy Napier, there he is right there. Well, all right. Well, we look forward to seeing everybody soon. We hope everybody has a wonderful evening and a great weekend ahead of you. As always, text a buddy. Danny White, those are wise words. I'm sure if he could go back and redo that press conference, he would also include, not only text a buddy, like if you have negative thoughts, but hey, text a buddy about the Vol Bros. Like they really, they try to be fair and unbiased. They do have orange tinted glasses, but they try to be fair and unbiased. So text a buddy about them. And we look forward to seeing everybody soon. Go Vols, baby. Go Vols.